Hello and welcome to episode 277 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham.
This week, New York State becomes the first in the U.S. to officially prohibit fossil fuels in new building construction. This is bad news for everyone who likes cooking with benzene. I mean, gas.
Wildfire smoke is way worse for you than pollution. It's like smoking up to a half pack of cigarettes a day. We had so much of it this summer that I can't eat a meal without going outside to breathe the cool, relaxing menthol-y wildfire smoke anymore, Brian.
Also, in New York, the NYPD can now confiscate your non-certified electric bike battery. That's right. The cops can now stop and frisk your bike.
All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. Brian, I want to start the show by addressing the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And that elephant is an EV that has been in the news, that has been widely viral. There was an incident in Prince George, British Columbia, Canada, where an EV driver was pulled over who was intoxicated, just going to get a Slurpee. And the reason why it's kind of notable is because the EV was a Barbie toy. It was an electric Barbie children's toy that he was driving down the street, this full-size grown man, just wanted a Slurpee, ran into some construction, had to go onto the street, was immediately pulled over by the cops, given a DUI, and we have a clip from CBC News.
Man, I just wanted to get a Slurpee. I got lazy. I didn't want to walk.
Now, Casper Lincoln says he was using the sidewalk until he came to a closed lane, and after that, he turned right. And that's when he was pulled over, prompting disbelief and a few memes. A lawyer, Kyla Lee, says driving any car without a license and insurance, even a toy one, is against the law.
The law is very clear. Toy cars constitute motor vehicles if they are powered by some sort of an engine. Nobody wants to hit somebody in a Barbie car, and drivers aren't looking for Barbie cars in the roadway.
It's true, they're not. But, I had to point out that was from CBC News because the whole thing sounds like a joke.
Yeah.
But it's not. And yeah, it's not Florida. It's Prince George on the coast of northern British Columbia here in Canada.
Well, I've often wondered how that works. Like, can you ride your bike intoxicated? Because some people would do that as an alternative.
But, they said any electric vehicle, or any motorized vehicle.
Yeah.
Powered. So an electric bike theoretically would qualify then, wouldn't it?
All right, I guess. Well, I'll try not to do that.
There's, here in North America anyway, there's sort of scooter share things going on where you could take an electric scooter.
Yeah.
And of course, people take that home from the bar because they're drunk. So you see them accumulate on Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings. Yeah, so I assume that those people are drunk. And apparently somebody, one person died up in Saskatoon, again with the Saskatoon, but somebody died up in Saskatoon last summer, like a year ago. Okay, I wanted to thank Glenn Wright for setting up the interview with D.U.I and their father, Chris, for taking the time on his lunch break. He's a school teacher. To make it happen, they pulled some strings. I put out a request on a show a couple weeks ago. And lo and behold, it happened, and I'm really glad it did. So you can check out that episode. That's an interview with Kike, a 12-year-old climate activist from the city that Brian and I live in Canada. And Brian, my air quality, we've got the Clean Energy Show air quality monitor going this morning, right now, as we speak, as we record this, it's 142.
Yeah.
Now, that deviates from the rest of the city again.
Right.
And it sometimes goes back to the rest of the city, but I'm smelling the steel mill.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how it's not picking up the refinery because they're filtering the particulate matter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think it's filtering the particulate matter. I'm starting to suspect it's not filtering the particulate matter from the steel mill, which is an electric arc furnace, not a coal, powered one, but it still puts out pollution. And to be fair, the air is rarely softly wafting in from the northwest, but today it is. And my air quality, before we go on, is the same as a city in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is number 1. And it is, if I look closely, roughly 155, and I'm 142. And so if I was a major city in the world, I would be number 2 right now. The Clean Energy Show would be number 2. And Lahore, Pakistan is 124, and city in Indonesia and Dubai are following that.
And that's super interesting because once you added your monitoring station, it's just more data, right? There's a handful of these in our city, but you can get one of these and add it to this network. And then the more data exists, the more we know about this kind of thing. And yeah, you're sort of proving that it can be quite sort of localized.
Yeah, we're basically citizen scientists here, and that's what they call it. And they encourage you to do that. And it's a good feeling to do that, to contribute, because as you know, I'm not really a scientist.
What? You just play one on a podcast.
Never even played one on TV, but maybe on a podcast. So yeah, that's what's going on now. I expect the wind to shift and we'll be more in line with the other monitors, which are just picking up wildfire smoke, which is pretty bad too.
Yeah.
And again, it's in the orange for wildfire smoke here in September when we're getting freezing temperatures at night sometimes.
Yeah, so the air is getting worse today, but I'll say again, it was generally pretty good these last couple of weeks of summer.
No, you haven't been checking the monitor. You've been living in your air-conditioned comfort with the windows closed and just assuming that everything's fine.
Okay, well,
there was a 13-day stretch in the end of August. I'll give you that, Brian.
Okay,
Stock.
there we go.
That's considered good, a 13-day stretch. And that's by far the longest stretch we've had since we got the monitor, and probably since summer began in early May when the fires began.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of hideous. And I've taken screenshots of the weeks of clean, days when we've had bad air, and I'm going to put them all together and see how many percentage of clean air days we've had. And it's bad because we're not right near the fires either. We're a few hours away from them at least, but we're getting it. And then, I can have a lot more of that later in my major segment in the show.
Well, here's what I'm thinking of. Sunday afternoon, I spent the day at Swamp Fest, which is a local music festival here in our town. And it takes place on Willow Island, which is a man-made island in a man-made lake that we have in our city. And when they have the festival going on for the weekend, they have ferries running constantly back and forth. So you can hop on a boat, get over to the island, enjoy Swamp Fest. And the weather was just beautiful. The weather was just perfect. So, something like that happens. And I think, it's back. Our wonderful summers are back. It was the perfect temperature. The air was good. The music was great. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking of in the last couple of weeks.
Okay, well, let's just check the Clean Energy Show air quality monitor for Sunday. It was?
Yeah.
You say?
Yeah.
Well, let's just have a look. What happened on Sunday? Yeah, it was clean air.
There you go.
It was 37. So you're right.
Yeah, and we did tons of biking on those 13 days that were clear. But you're right. That's atrocious that we shouldn't be happy that we have just 13 days in a row of clean air.
And we had 3 days there. Now, some of these things are at night, they'll waft in at night and, maybe you're experiencing cleaner air during the day when you're conscious, but I still count that because it comes in my windows and kills me.
Yeah.
And shortens my life. So I don't appreciate that very much. Yeah. So Swamp Fest was good, but I still say that there was a lot of smoke in the upper atmosphere. And it was kind of gray, hazy. It wasn't the blue skies that we're used to.
I don't remember that, but you could be right.
Yeah. We just stopped looking at the sky because it's so bad now. We just, don't look up, in other words. So on the Patreon podcast last week, you had an interesting segment on floating solar that rotates.
Yeah.
So this is like a big barge of solar, and the whole thing rotates to follow the sun, which is an interesting thing. And I looked it up, and other people are doing that too. It wasn't just the people that you highlighted, but I thought that was an interesting story because they add 10 to 20% more electricity generated when you actually point right at the sun in the most ideal way. So, and I would think that would be pretty easy because everything moves quite easily on water. So you don't have to have a whole bunch of individual motors moving little racks of solar panels to track.
Seems more efficient for sure.
I wanted to note that we were talking about this place between the 2 major cities in our province that has a charger for us non-Tesla drivers. And they did get it fixed finally because it was a very busy charger. And I might even be going up there again. I made a couple of trips there recently, and I'll be doing some more. But they own another place in a town called Outlook, which is less than an hour away from that one, kind of out in the boonies. And they've disconnected one of their chargers because the power company is charging them too much money just to be connected.
Right.
And it's not getting used. So, because it is an obscure place, but an important one for some people, they've just kept one charger connected. This is the co-op, which is a group of co-ops that have, well, they want to help the EV transition, but their grid is giving them a hard time.
Yeah.
And I don't know the details of that, and I can't know because they're not going to tell me, because they don't want to, cause a stir with the power company, which is connected to the government because it's a crown corporation, a government-run arm's length supposedly, but not really. Haha. So that was the first time I've seen something like that, Brian, is that they've disconnected a charger because it wasn't being used, and the grid is charging them so much just for the connection fee that it wasn't worth it. And that's depressing.
Yeah.
And that speaks to our province that we live in and how it's different than, say, British Columbia, which is pro-EV and their power utility that, has all the hydro and everything. They're charging, they're trying to make this happen. They're not discouraging it. And that what's happening, maybe quietly, I'm starting to sense is bad things in Saskatchewan. So maybe we should sue their ass too, because there's lots of lawsuits going on. The oil prices are sluggish. OPEC has opened up the taps, and our province here where we live relies on oil as one of our major commodities, and we have a big budget deficit because they misjudged the oil price. They thought it was going to be $71 barrel and turned out to be $61 for a lot of the time recently. So that's bad. And in Alberta, they rely even more on oil next door to us. And they predicted $68 a barrel, which was a bit smarter for them, but they're losing a crap load of money. For every dollar that they miss on the estimate of oil, we lose $18 million over the course of a year. So if the average oil price is $10 less, that's $180 million. And that's a lot of money for our little province here of 1 million, 1.1 or 2 million people. Our government didn't even mention oil. They don't like to mention that because they know I'll be on them. They'll know I'll be on them. and make fun of them. For every dollar, it's worse in Alberta. So they projected $68 a barrel, and now they're going to grow their deficit by $1.3 billion because of oil being low. And I'm starting to get the sense that oil is going to remain soft. That this has been predicted for years now, that OPEC would open the taps and sell as much oil as they could once the peak of oil is reached. Now, we're not at that yet, but we're getting close. And they're starting to see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, it's difficult to predict, right? Because you don't know what OPEC is going to do, and they have a tremendous power to influence the price. And so I wouldn't want to be the person trying to predict what the price of oil is going to be.
But maybe you got to underpredict it. Maybe you have to be careful on that. And if it happens to go higher, then great. But
under-promise and over-deliver. That's the only thing you can hope for. All right, so from Canary Media, New York State, and their fossil fuel ban. We've talked about this before, but it has now become official and has survived some court challenges. So this is very good news. On July 25th, the State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council approved an all-electric building standard, making New York the first state in the nation to prohibit gas and other fossil fuels in most new buildings. And as we've discussed before, 31% of New York State's planet warming pollution comes from buildings. This is a state that has, say, less cars and car traffic than California. So buildings account for a huge part of their emissions. The new rules apply to new structures up to 7 stories tall for commercial and industrial buildings up to 100,000 square feet. And this starts at the end of the year, December 31st, 2025. Buildings bigger than that will get a few more years. They have to be all electric starting in 2029. And they have left some room for exceptions. And I think this is wise. It is not going to happen overnight necessarily, these kinds of transitions. They left room for exceptions, including new laboratories, crematoriums. So good news for the crematoriums. They'll still be able to, I'm not, I guess you can have an electric crematorium.
I don't know. Can you though? I mean, you need a lot of heat real quick.
Yeah. Induction crematorium.
And they're technically small businesses. Induction. They're technically small businesses. So you'd have to have a big power grid connection, and that might be an issue to get lots of electricity in there. Unless they had electric hearses, and then they could just draw from the big batteries in the hearses
Of
to
the
fry
hearses
people
and-
to do their cooking.
Anyway, restaurants are also on the list of possible exemptions, and large buildings whose owners can prove that the grid isn't ready to accommodate their sizable all-electric heating needs. And so, yeah, I suppose there are some possible edge cases here. And this was challenged. And on July 23rd, a federal district court in New York upheld the state's ability to implement the All-Electric Buildings Act. The groups challenging this in court included the New York State Builders Association, the National Association of Home Builders, National Propane Gas Association, and a few local union chapters for plumbers and electricians who alleged that it's preempted by the federal Energy Policy and Conservation Act. And that was the same justification that was used in California. We talked about this in Berkeley. They were able to overturn this in Berkeley, California, and using that logic of the Federal Energy Policy and Conservation Act superseding it. But the New York judge was unconvinced by this argument, noting that the Berkeley decision relied on deficient interpretations of terms like energy use and is simply not persuasive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When the plumber starts suing, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, plumbers are generally in charge of the natural gas piping. That's done by plumbers.
Right. Okay.
So perhaps they're worried that a portion of their business is going to go away.
Well, that's reality, friends. We're getting rid of natural gas. Start to realize it. And yeah, there's going to be fights like this all the time now.
Yeah, just New York is the first, and they were able to uphold it through court challenges, which is, good news.
Well, Brian, wildfire smoke is harmful, okay? It's more harmful than we probably know. The reason why I bring this up is because we have wildfire smoke here.
Yeah.
Right now, inside. My
We were
indoor
just talking
clean
about
energy show monitor and my purifier, I had to turn it off because it was going on high speed because wildfire smoke.
Yeah.
And possibly a steam mill down the road. But right now, if you look at the trees a couple 100 meters away, they are obscured by smoke. And I have that luxury of looking out my upstairs window because I border a little park area as well as a pipeline. And I can see that those trees are obscured.
Well, that's generally what I do. I look out my bedroom window and I can see sort of far enough in the distance that I can judge the amount of haze for that day. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like your own little laser particle, PM2.
Yeah.
2.5. Anyway, yeah. So in the summertime, this all started in pretty early in May because climate change. There's things happening in our boreal forests, which are, boreal means north. They are north.
Yeah.
They are often in unpopulated places and difficult to get to and manage. So it's not our fault, but some American politicians back in July complained that Canada's smoke was spoiling their summers. And of course, I want to stick a pencil in their head and impale them because they are horrible people to say that, because my summers are being wrecked. Your summers are being wrecked. You're boasting about this one good day you went outside where it was clean for once. I mean, come on. It's 6 members of Congress from Wisconsin and Minnesota asked Canada to say how it plans to tackle these blazes and reduce the haze billowing south. And of course, they are Republicans. And of course, Republicans are taking $500 million of subsidies from fossil fuels. And of course, we all know what the Republicans are doing. They're banning wind. They're banning solar. They're taking away EV tax credits. They're doing everything in their power to support fossil fuels. And that's fine. But then you go and complain about the smoke and then try and blame it on other things. They're trying to blame it on arson, which mostly they're not. They're mostly lightning strikes. You might as well blame God for that and see if he strikes you with a bolt of lightning for going up against that, you Republican. The letter said, in our neck of the woods, summer months are the best time of year to spend time outdoors recreating. Well, really? Gee, that's what a thought that is, said the two men who've been restricted to their homes most of the summer, enjoying time with family and creating new memories. Well, isn't that sweet? The U.S. representatives from Wisconsin and Minnesota wrote in their letter July 11th. Now, I've touched on this before, but the smoke remains. They get a waft of it now and again and complain that their summers are wrecked, and it's been relentless here. And it's not good for you. That's what I'm concerned about. The wildfire smoke makes it difficult to do these things, they said. And they addressed their letter to Kirsten Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the United States, demanded to know her government's plan for tackling the wildfires. How about we stop burning fossil fuel, you morons? And accused it of lax forest management, which has contributed to suffocating smoke. Our community shouldn't suffer because of poor decisions made across the border, they said. The poor decisions are being made largely below the border, people. And if you want to pretend that climate change isn't real and say that we should rake our forests, and that's the problem, then you are a moron and absolutely pathologically insane. They said this on X later on. The U.S. lawmakers also partly blamed arson for the fires, but the vast majority, of course, lightning. Many of the areas where fires burn are in areas so remote that forest management techniques to lessen their severity, such as prescribed burns and thinning combustible plant matter, are not possible. About 45% of Canada's forests that are on public land are managed, while 30% are not, according to the federal government. Michael Waddington, a professor at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, who studies the interaction between wildfires and forested land, said a warming climate was turning those landscapes into a tinderbox. The United States is, for the most part, the main reason for that, said Dr. Waddington, referring to the U.S.'s role in planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions. Pretending climate change isn't real won't make it go away. The smoke only gets worse from here, much worse. This is the beginning, Brian. This is not the new normal. This is the beginning of hell. It's going to get worse from here. Yes, there may be better years. There may be wetter years, but overall, it gets worse. So it's not livable now. It's not healthy now, but it gets worse from here. So why are we dealing with climate change, I ask? Funny that they had to come up with excuses like arson. But it was lightning, and poor forest management is not. It was lightning, and it was just the way it is, and it's climate change. Wildfire smoke is like smoking a half pack a day at worst. And if you have a kid with severe asthma, I have kids with partial asthma, but, smoke, you can't say to them, here, kid with asthma, go smoke a half a pack of cigarettes and see how you do. Because that would send them to the hospital, and it could kill them. And that's what's actually happening with this smoke. You don't see the headlines of this all the time because it comes in statistics after the fact. And this is from Bloomberg. This is an opinion piece in Bloomberg. $1 trillion in U.S. wages has gone up in literal smoke from fires hundreds of miles away, according to a new study. It's a reminder that climate change is no longer a problem for our grandchildren, but is inflicting profound economic and health damage right now. And that's kind of my point, Brian. It's happening now. It's you and I and our children and our children's future children, perhaps, but it's happening right now. From 2020 through 2024, U.S. workers in the retail, wholesale, transportation, construction, mining, and agricultural industries alone, that's not all of them, it's not all the industries there is, lost $1.1 trillion in wages because of exposure to wildfire smoke, according to a new estimate by Bloomberg Intelligence. This is smoke largely from Canada, sometimes from California, but this is in 2023 when all the smoke, we had the worst wildfire year ever. A lot of it blew south and made the sky orange. Smoke causes people to miss work and generally to be less productive. The study only looked at a quarter of all the industries in the U.S., so it could be a lot worse than $1.1 trillion. It could be much, much higher. Typically, the fire-prone west coast of the United States has been the most vulnerable to wage impacts from smoke, but the recent surge in Canadian wildfires has shifted that burden to the U.S. Midwest, where workers in vulnerable industries are especially concentrated. In some counties in Minnesota and the Dakotas, more than a quarter of all wages in these industries were lost in Canada's record wildfire season of 2023, according to Bloomberg Intelligence. During the Canadian wildfires that year, when smoke wafted across much of the U.S., emergency room visits for asthma increased by nearly 20%. This is not something you see on the day of, Brian, but these stats show up later and you realize that this is a major, major problem. And this is from Vermont Public Radio. Climate scientists say, when the air is very hot and dry, trees function almost like straws. The hot, dry air sucks moisture out of the soil and plants, a bit like kindling or firewood curing in a woodshed. It means that forest is more primed to burn and burn with greater intensity when lightning strikes. So this is the 21st century fires. they're getting worse. They're burning with greater intensity, and the heat from them starts fires. It doesn't even have to spread. Sometimes the heat can spread 50, 100 meters away and start fires or buildings on fire. Dan Thompson with the Canadian Forest Service said this warming trend is shortening the time between large wildfires in the boreal forest. Where forests in central Canada have evolved to burn every 50 years, they now burn every decade or even more often than that. For species like jack pine and balsam fir, this doesn't leave enough time for their cones to develop and for them to regenerate between fires. Climate change is also changing the way fires spread. More fires are burning further and hotter for more days at a time, leaving fewer seed trees behind. This is from PV Magazine in June of this year. Smoke from ongoing Canadian wildfires has continued to suppress irradiance levels across Canada and the eastern U.S. in June. Irradiance means how much sun is hitting your solar panels, so it's blocking it out like a cloud, or a thin cloud at least. Impacts are stretching as far away as Europe. We had a listener tell us about smoke in Switzerland in the summertime. Well, it's wrecking your solar too. That's an incredible, depressing feedback loop there. And that's analysts were done using something called Soulcast API. Persistent fire activity combined with stronger than usual westerly winds, and it drove smoke haze across the Atlantic, causing measurable declines in solar power on both sides of the ocean. And finally, from The Guardian, for people living in areas with the most intensely polluted air, risk of heart failure is 27% higher than those for living in areas with the cleanest air. And I can't move, but if I had the means, I think I would, given what I'm learning from my air quality monitoring here.
Yes, I think the moon might be the best place to move.
It might be the only place without wildfire smoke is actually the moon. So,
from Electrek, stop and frisk your bike. Okay, it's not really stop and frisk, but there's a new rule regarding e-bike safety that passed in 2023, and we've talked about this on the show. All e-bikes sold in New York City must use batteries that meet the UL standards and come with certification. But that doesn't mean that existing e-bikes haven't already been operating with non-certified batteries. So these new rules would enable the NYPD to confiscate such batteries if they're found to be lacking the proper safety certifications. The batteries would then go to the sanitation department for proper disposal. Last year, 6 people were killed in fires attributed to faulty e-bike batteries, which is terrible. So far in 2025, there's been 1 fatality recorded. The last 3 years of data indicated a continuous downward trend in the number of e-bike battery injuries and deaths since the UL certification was imposed in 2023. And just as a quick comparison, car-related deaths in the city continue to hover at around 10 times higher than those related to e-bikes, including dozens of traffic fatalities caused by cars each month. However, those numbers are also trending downwards, and that's part of a larger trend that correlates with the introduction of congestion pricing in New York that we've talked about it. And that has reduced the number of cars navigating around parts of New York City. So, that's some good news there. Fewer cars, fewer car accidents.
And you've talked about this before in the show. The issue is that people were buying either e-bikes or e-bike kits from China that weren't. There's this regulation called UL. It has to be UL listed to be certified to be safe. And with electricity, you don't want to fool around, right? Especially with batteries, because batteries can catch on fire. So what they were having is problems with uncertified batteries from China, usually from China. Sometimes you can build your own battery from components from China, little cell components of batteries. Yeah, and this was happening. And I think awareness is also probably up too, even if you don't replace your battery with a UL certified one. You would at least keep an eye on it, a close eye, and maybe put it in a place that is safer to charge, and maybe not leave it charging, because I think that's one of the major issues is leaving it charging and the charger's not turning off. I learned that mine does, so I was worried because mine was manufactured, but it was a major brand that I got my bike from.
And I believe mine turns off as well, but it is recommended that you unplug it after it's finished charging,
And nowadays, since we talked about these stories, I've been putting it on the stove, because we have a glass top stove with a hood over it that's made for fire.
Right.
So, but I it doesn't get warm, so I'm not worried, but I just wanted, I'm just being extra careful about that. But
Yeah.
Because any battery can do that. If you buy a battery for, say, a drill, or I've got the snow shovel that, you can get snow blowers and lawnmowers that have big batteries in them and leaf blowers. But those are all kind of UL listed. They're all certified not to. The chargers are expensive, so you're spending more money, and that's kind of the issue. People wanted to save money and not have all these safeguards in effect.
Yeah, definitely something to be aware of. All right, moving on to Australia. The story is from The Guardian. Abandoned Queensland coal borehole found to be emitting 10,000 cars worth of greenhouse gases. So this is a thing I had not heard before. We know that there is often a problem with methane leaking from oil wells, but this is from test boreholes that are drilled to look for coal and to find out what kind of coal resources are available.
So you're drilling here and there, and you're just seeing if there's any coal here. So you drill a big hole, and then the methane gas comes out regardless?
Yes. Well, the bad news is there's been 130,000 of these boreholes drilled.
Oh, no. No.
But only a fraction of them actually seem to be emitting methane, but it's a lot. So the first one they discovered, this is about 100 meters deep hole. It wasn't visible from the surface. And yeah, they found that it was leaking the same amount of greenhouse gases in a year as about 10,000 cars. And there still could be thousands more. Like, it's only a fraction of these, but there is 130,000 of these type of boreholes. So, even a fraction of that could be, in the thousands. So scientists at the University of Queensland monitored a second coal exploration borehole that was emitting about the same amount, and it was forcing groundwater to spew into the air like a geyser. There's a little video of it on the Guardian story of air basically popping up through this little pond like a geyser, and it's from methane leaking. So methane, as we've discussed, when it is leaking, and traditionally it's leaking from, like an oil well, and they will sometimes burn it off where you see a flare gas. And that is technically better, I guess, because methane is a more potent greenhouse gas. It doesn't last as long. It's sort of like a 20-year period, and then it sort of dissipates. But in the short term, methane gas is a worse greenhouse gas than just about anything. It's very potent. So these are drilled by coal exploration companies. They can be done in just a day, and they tell the company about the quality of the coal or how it changes in different areas. So, there's about 130,000 of these just in Queensland, although, only a fraction is thought to be leaking. So basically you have to drill one of these holes, and I guess you have to get lucky that there's also methane down there as well, which they could maybe turn into a methane mine or, pump it out and use it or something like that. But they don't, because they just drill these holes because, they're looking for coal.
Yes, and coal is a fossil fuel that we want to stop using. It's the worst of all the fossil fuels. And even looking for coal is hurting the climate, which is just sickening.
And we know that the cleanup of the fossil fuel industry is a huge, huge problem that, oil wells are often not properly cleaned up afterwards. So, it isn't just the expense of drilling the hole and getting the oil, but it really should be the expense of then cleaning up that hole or these boreholes. You can plug these boreholes if you want to do the right thing. But, the fossil fuel economy has many, many downsides that, again, are often not talked about. And it's often your government that ends up paying for the cleanup in these kinds of situations.
And that's what I'm really worried about when these companies do go bankrupt, smaller ones, medium ones. Who's going to clean up their wells? Because they're not even cleaning up now when they're functioning in our country. So then it's even more subsidies for oil and gas because we have to clean up their mess, and it's a horrible mess. Yeah. It goes on and on and on. It's time for some listener mail. Let's dip into the mailbag, Brian.
All right, we have a letter here from Randy. Heard you on a recent episode talking about cold weather heat pumps, a favorite topic of ours. Fluid Power Systems is a company that is cleverly using off-the-shelf tech to produce heat pumps good to minus 35 Fahrenheit or minus 37 Celsius. And it can produce hot water as well at 180 Fahrenheit. And he's included the link here and says, pretty cool or hot, right? Love the show. Randy from Florence, Massachusetts. And I watched the video, and I thought was interesting because it brings up the topic of cascading heat pumps, which we may or may not have talked about a few years ago on the show. I'm not totally sure.
Is that when one heat pump heats another heat pump, or takes
basically
a heat
yes.
pump takes the heat from another heat pump and just makes it? I'm just using my brain here, what's left of it, to guess. But is that what it is?
The context clues. Yes,
Yeah.
Most heat pumps are a single unit, like a single closed system of fluid, but a cascading heat pump could have maybe 2 or 3 different loops, and it's usually a type of refrigerant in these loops. And when you've got sort of a single unit heat pump, it's like, well, you just have to pick the best fluid for that. And, those can work pretty well. But yeah, the idea is that you can have like 3 different stages to your heat pump that have 3 different, perhaps, liquids in them. And one can feed to the other one to feed to the other one. And it allows you to go even colder in terms of your efficiency for your heat pump.
I just want to point out that a heat pump is like a reverse air conditioner, because we get complaints that we get too technical here. And but there is a heat pump in your refrigerator. You may feel hot air blowing out of your refrigerator. That's because it is transferring the heat energy from inside, even though it's not that temperature, just taking out that heat and blowing it out and cooling it. And what a heat pump does for a house is reverse that process. And even when it's, like they said, minus 37 Celsius, they can find some heat energy in there. That's why we have the scale of Kelvin, if you remember high school science, that goes way down to 0, where there is no energy, which feels like that around here sometimes. And it manages to pull the heat energy out even when it's freezing cold and transfer it into your home to heat your home. And it does that by compressing and uncompressing a gas or a fluid, a refrigerant that you talk about. And those have been changing over the years for safety reasons and for the environment. And so now they're talking about just putting a couple of these together. One transfers a little bit of heat from outdoors and then transfers it to another heat pump, which takes that more concentrated, I imagine, that heat than it would be otherwise. And sometimes they take it out of the air. Sometimes they take it out of the ground. How's that working?
Well, I believe it works. The only catch is that it is then a more complicated machine to make. And, this company says they're using off-the-shelf tech, which is great because then it makes everything, fairly reasonable to make. But there's no sort of getting around that a 3-stage heat pump is going to be a more complicated machine to make and build and maintain than a single stage. So,
well, it'd be 3 times the price too, wouldn't it? I mean, wouldn't it require 3 heat pumps essentially?
But it's like a lot of things. We were talking about heat pump clothes dryers, and I'm not convinced that heat pump clothes dryers are necessarily the right solution, because you're adding an awful lot of complexity to something that is just so simple when it just uses a resistive heater that you may end up, in repairs and replacement costs for your heat pump dryer may not be worth it.
Because there is moving parts,
one.
Unlike a heater in a clothes dryer is basically like a hot wire that gets really hot, like a toaster. That's resistive, but there's moving parts, there's motors, there's compressing fluids, there's, I guess, the potential for leaks, there's the potential for, but I mean, our refrigerators, ours has been working for 20 years. God willing, it'll work for more because I need it to. These compressors have been around for a long time and they're pretty good.
Okay, well, I have the perfect story for you. So we bought our house about 20 years ago, and a year or two after moving in, our local utility had a program to get rid of old, inefficient refrigerators. And they actually paid me $50 to come in and take my old refrigerator away, the one that we had, basically the extra fridge that we had in the basement. And it was a very old fridge from the 60s or the 70s.
But it was running and using electricity.
But it was running. It worked. But it was like, I like efficiency, so like I'm all for signing up for this. They'll give me $50, and then I can put in a more efficient fridge that uses less energy. Anyway, that fridge just died, and now we have to replace it.
Oh, really?
It was there for like 12 years, maybe 15 years, and we brought in the appliance repair guy, and he said, "No, it's too old. We can't get parts for it. You got to throw it."
Boo! That sucks.
I question the wisdom. It might have been better to leave the old fridge from the 70s in there. I don't know, but that was very, very disappointing to get that news.
What brand was it?
It was Danby.
Well, Danby's kind of a bargain basement brand. But I will say I've got a deep freeze that is still working after 25 years. Good.
Okay.
Where's the time go? Where does it go?
We had very few choices because we have a basement bar that was built in 1962, and we needed a specifically sized fridge that was smaller than normal.
I see.
So when we went shopping, I think that was the only one we could find that actually fit the space.
Oh, I've got a Danby little refrigerator in my walk-in closet here that I used to use for soft drinks while I was computing all day and working and writing.
Right.
But it is not used for that anymore. It's used for holding extra groceries.
Right.
My kids are like heifers. They drink so much milk that we have to bring it in, and there's no room in the fridge. These 4-liter gallon-sized jugs of milk all the time. But anyway, if you want to contact us, and I hope you do, about anything, it's Clean Energy Show, all one word, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. You can leave us an online voicemail at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. We love that. And you can always join the conversation, as many people have, on our Patreon page and get access to additional content. Brian, it's coming up on our 1-year anniversary of Patreon.
Yeah.
It has exceeded our expectations, especially mine. I am so humbled by the amount of people who have joined and humbled by the amount of people who have chosen to pay some every month to get their perks. And it's just, I wouldn't have guessed it in a million years that so many people have joined. But it's great. And it's also a great way to hear from our listeners because they leave comments there. Join our Patreon today as a paying member and get access to exclusive episodes like the last one we did a week ago on various topics. We tend to be more casual, but we also talk about clean energy. We also have ad-free episodes, exclusive access, like I said, to the Discord server. We have discounts at our merch store. Merch store is not getting a lot of love these days, but it's there. It's there if you want it. Lots of weird little things, hats, t-shirts, decent quality, I'm told. Early access to episodes before they are public, besides behind-the-scenes material and thank you credits on our video podcast, which is coming back, and also on our audio podcast, one I'm going to do later in the show, because it's the first episode of September that we're doing of a regular show. Thank you to all who support our show. And coming up next, of course, is the lightning round. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Bluetti has unveiled the world's first sodium-ion portable power station. What's a portable power station? Well, it's kind of like a generator, except it's not a generator, it's a battery.
Yeah.
And it's got different outlets. It's got a fan on it. It's got different things on it. It kind of looks like a little generator, like a big bread maker-sized item. And they're usually lithium-ion. You're familiar with the lithium-ion batteries, but you may not be familiar with the upcoming tech. This is notable because we talked about sodium-ion coming from China going into cars. This is an actual product you can buy off the shelf now with a sodium-ion battery. It can be charged as low as the temperature of minus 15 degrees Celsius. That's not the outdoor temperature. That's the temperature of the battery. If you leave it outdoors at minus 15, you can charge it at that temperature. But it will continue to work down to minus 25, which is pretty good. That's one of the great qualities of sodium ion, which is why I'd like to see them maybe come to electric cars where we live in Canada, and the coldest part of Canada here. It would be kind of nice. And it supports 1,900 watts of solar input, which is quite a bit of power that you could throw in there if you want to charge it up, say, at a cottage or a camper. And it offers a 4,000 cycle lifetime. Compare that at 1,000 cycles for lithium-ion batteries. Complete discharge and charge of around 1,000. It weighs about 16 kilograms, which is about 20 to 25% heavier than comparable lithium-ion battery power stations. And that's the rub. That's the payoff. The penalty you pay is you have to have it heavier, which is not great for electric cars, for long-range electric cars anyway.
Yeah, it's one of the issues with putting them in electric cars is the heavier weight. But of course, these formulas are always improving, and it's, already being offered in some cars in China. So it seems like a doable technology.
CATL, that's the world's largest battery maker, and they are from China, not surprisingly, launched its new Shenzhen Pro on Monday, the world's first lithium iron phosphate battery that has over 470 miles of range. That's 558 kilometers of WLTP rated range, which is overestimating it from real world, but maybe 400 miles, maybe something kind of close to my Chevy Bolt EV, which is about, 417 kilometers of range or something like that. But it is the first lithium iron phosphide battery with high range for cars. And India has nearly 30 million vehicles. By 2030, the government there is aiming for 80% of 2- and 3-wheelers to be electric. You know that there's a lot of 2- and 3-wheelers in India. Electrifying those goes a long way to cleaning up the air. And they're aiming for 70% of commercial vehicles to be electric by 2030, 40% of buses, 30% of private cars. The Trump administration says renewables are making grids less reliable. Data and facts shows the exact opposite is true. Time for a CES Fast Fact. Well, what are the main risks of death worldwide, Brian? High blood pressure. Number one.
Mm-hmm.
I've almost died on this show many times, but thanks to the Clean Energy Show defibrillator, I've come back to life and not died when I get angry. Air pollution is number 2. If you combine indoor and outdoor air pollution, it is the number 2 killer. And smoking is number 3. So, it's more dangerous maybe at some point for you and I to live here than it is for smoking.
Wow.
So, combine the two, and you're probably in a bad way if you smoke and live in a highly polluted area. High blood sugar is 4. Outdoor particulate matter by itself is 5. Obesity is 6. And high cholesterol is 7. So, if we didn't have all those problems as it was, we've now got pollution from fossil fuels and climate change. California continues to use less fossil fuel on its electricity generation than in previous years. 19% less. There's a mix of different things that goes into making electricity for your home and everywhere else. Coal was the big one. Natural gas is easy and relatively cheap, but then there's solar and wind and hydro from hydro dams and other things like a little bit of geothermal in there. But anyway, they're using 19% less fossil fuels to make all the electricity in California and 39% less than just 2 years ago. So that's working. California is one of those places that is living in the future, or at least the present. Over the last 12 months, the United States added 13.2 gigawatts of battery capacity. I'll say it again. A gigawatt is pretty much what a nuclear reactor can spit out in electricity measurement. But this is putting out 13.2 of battery capacity. That is the amount that it can put out at any given moment, the peak it can put out. That's up 50%. The batteries that they are putting on the grid, and they're using batteries to make solar last longer, and we can use solar more often if we put batteries there. We can stabilize the grid. It's up 50% in the United States more than a year ago, and that analysts are saying that's going to keep going.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the jackass in the White House does and the administration, it doesn't matter. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said Monday she doesn't think the detention of hundreds of South Koreans in an immigration raid at the Hyundai plant in Georgia will deter investment in the United States. She is wrong. The Chinese-made Neo Firefly scores 5-star rating in Euro NCAP crash test. That's important because the perception of Chinese vehicles is that they're crappy and they're not safe. Not true. The actual opposite is true. They actually care about safety in China, and they care about quality in China as well. This marks the latest safety recognition for the Firefly. This is a car in Europe following its top score in China's crash test at the end of July. So they're going to be selling those in Europe. And if you want to sell them, you got to crash it and see how safe it is. So the consumer can have a rating to see how safe it is before they buy it. There's a huge backlog in gas turbines. What's a gas turbine? A gas turbine is something that turns natural gas into electricity. It is used for when you come home from work and you want to get a peak power. They have to raise the power really fast. So they use it's almost like a jet engine. But there's also gas turbines that just make gas into electricity, right? Well, if manufacturers doubled output, they wouldn't produce enough capacity to produce 1/6 of the world's new demand by 2040. Ergo, too bad, natural gas. We're going to have to get renewables in there because you're not going to be able to cover all that electricity.
Yeah, natural gas is not the answer. It would be too difficult to increase electricity demand by that much using natural gas.
Texas just banned cellular agriculture, otherwise known as lab-grown meat, which we've talked about on the show and will continue to do so. And Brian, you can pack an AK-47 in your pants and hide it because of freedom, but God help you if you try to sell lab-grown meat to a customer. Can't do it anymore because it's not as free as they say it is. Around $2.2 trillion is set to be invested in renewables, nuclear, upgrading power grids, battery storage, low-emission fuels, efficiency of electricity systems, and electrification this year. $2.2 trillion. And that's twice as much as going into gas, coal, and oil. And yet we worry about those gas, coal, and oil jobs when twice as much money is going into the good stuff. Twice as much, twice as many jobs, more than twice as many jobs.
Yeah, the number of jobs in clean energy has been surpassing those for quite a while in fossil fuels.
It's time for the tweet of the week, which is not every week, but occasionally I do it from the U.S. Department of Energy. That is an actual department. The United States Department of Energy, the DOE, is a U.S. federal agency responsible for national energy policy and energy production, including promoting energy efficiency and renewable energy. And guess what they tweeted? I'm sure most of you have seen this already. The actual Department of U.S. Energy tweeted, wind and solar energy infrastructure is essentially worthless when it's dark outside and the wind is not blowing.
Yeah.
In other words, the Department of Energy has been reading Facebook, reading idiots on Facebook, and coming up with this brilliant tweet. But now readers added context, which you could do now on Twitter.
Yeah.
On X, you can add context, and they added, batteries allow electricity to be stored and used at different time than when it is generated.
Yeah.
The U.S. government has had a giant lobotomy, Brian. They are so stupid and so idiotic on this whole issue. I wish they would all combust.
And we just finished talking about how battery storage capacity
50%.
is up 50% than a year ago. And of course, the amount of money being spent on clean energy, double that of fossil fuels in the coming year. And that proves all of that wrong.
And finally this week, China's solar exports to Africa are surging. A new analysis shows more than 15 gigawatts of Chinese solar equipment reached the continent in the past year. That's almost doubling Africa's installed capacity in 1 year. Falling prices from China's overproduction of solar panels are meeting Africa's urgent need for reliable electricity. They've got too many panels, they're sending them to Africa, which is a good thing. More than 600 million people in Africa still live without power, and power outages remain a common thing even in connected areas. South Africa and Nigeria are leading these imports, while countries like Sierra Leone and Chad made significant gains. Whether through large solar farms or rooftop panels, the shift signals a major takeoff in Africa's clean energy transition. They are behind, and they can do it, and of course they have great solar resources to do it.
Well, I don't know, James. Maybe someone should tell them that it's dark out at nighttime.
Oh, you know, that time when we don't use very much electricity? Okay, very good.
All right, and on that note, that is our show for this week. You can contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. On social media, we're Clean Energy Pod, and of course, there is our Patreon at patreon.com/cleanenergypod. And don't forget about that merch store if you'd like some merch. And remember to hit the follow or subscribe button on your podcast app to make sure that you get our new episodes that are delivered every week.
So if you join our Patreon, you can get perks, and you can start for as little as $1 US per month. But if you get up to the Clean Club and beyond level, you get a shout out once per month for supporting the podcast. And I'm going to do that right now. Our Clean Club executive members are Green Bastard and Brent Routley. Clean Club Plus, Bob Armstrong. Shout out to Bob, John Hayes. It's Hayes, right? I keep forgetting. It's Hayes.
I think Hayes.
And Wes S. And the Clean Club is Noah Cook, Denny and Linda, Jonathan Dick, Andy Fessler, Josh Engen, Sean Hines H., Sean Hines, Timo Kellenberger, Landon Yu, Peter O'Donnell, Weldon Penner, Robu, Roshan Gervais, and Richard W. Thank you so much for you guys for supporting the show. And if you have any ideas of what we should be doing for perks or how that should be structured, thank you all for supporting climate positive content. We'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.